In the year 1944, amidst the challenges of a world at war, a unique and telling episode unfolded in a small town in Ohio, reflecting the intricate interplay between democratic ideals and wartime exigencies. At the heart of this narrative lies the temporary shutdown of a factory, a pause not dictated by mechanical failure or labor strikes, but by the fundamental exercise of democratic participation. Voting. The German prisoners of war were housed in Camp Perry, located in Port Clinton, Ohio. Established in 1943, Camp Perry served as one of the numerous POW camps across the United States, designed to accommodate the influx of prisoners captured during the Allied campaigns in Europe and North Africa. With a capacity to hold up to 2,000 prisoners, the camp's layout was typical of the era, featuring rows of wooden barracks surrounded by barbed wire, guard towers strategically placed along the perimeter, and facilities that included mess halls, a medical center, and administrative offices. Guard units, often composed of older American soldiers or those unfit for frontline duty, maintained the security of the camp. These guards were responsible for overseeing the daily activities of the prisoners, ensuring adherence to regulations while facilitating the labor arrangements that had become a cornerstone of the POW system in the United States. The use of POWs as laborers was a pragmatic solution to the labor shortages experienced on the home front due to the war effort. Prisoners from Camp Perry, including those assigned to the factory in question, were engaged in various industries, ranging from agriculture and canneries to lumber yards and railroads. In this particular instance, the POWs were tasked with floor cleanup and maintenance at a local manufacturing plant. According to War Department circulars and U.S. Army Provost Marshal General records, the employment of POWs was governed by strict guidelines, ensuring compliance with the Geneva Convention. Prisoners were compensated with coupons or credits, which could be used to purchase items at the camp canteen. Rationing policies were in place to manage resources, reflecting the broader constraints faced by the American public during wartime. On an otherwise ordinary day in 1944, the factory's whistle blew at precisely noon, signaling an unexpected cessation of work. The reason was not an industrial dispute, but a collective civic duty. Local elections were taking place, and the workforce was granted the time to participate in the democratic process. This practice was in accordance with federal labor laws, which guaranteed employees the right to vote without penalty or loss of pay, a principle upheld even amidst the war's demands. The factory's supervisors meticulously documented those who availed themselves of this opportunity, as was customary, to ensure compliance with labor regulations. A placard prominently displayed within the factory cited the relevant federal statutes, underscoring the importance of civic participation as a regulated aspect of workplace safety and rights. For the German POWs witnessing this event, the cessation of activity was a moment of curiosity and observation. Red Cross inspection reports and camp newspapers provide insights into the prisoners' experiences, noting their interest in the workings of American democracy, albeit from a distance. These records emphasize the absence of propaganda or coercion in the day's proceedings, highlighting the procedural nature of the event rather than any ideological motivations. Civilian attitudes toward the POWs varied, shaped by a mix of wartime patriotism and practical necessity. Recorded incidents from the period suggest a general acceptance of the POWs' presence, tempered by occasional tensions. However, on this particular day, the focus was less on the prisoners themselves and more on the broader community's engagement in the electoral process. Life within Camp Perry was structured around a regimen designed to maintain order and morale among the prisoners. Discipline was enforced through a combination of military oversight and self-governance, with prisoners often organizing their own recreational and educational activities. Medical access was provided by the camp's facilities, ensuring adherence to international standards of care. Mail and communication with families were permitted, subject to censorship protocols, providing a crucial link to life beyond the barbed wire. The YMCA played a significant role in supporting educational programs, offering classes in various subjects, and fostering an environment of intellectual engagement. As the war drew to a close, plans for the repatriation of German POWs were formulated, guided by directives that emphasized the orderly and humane return of prisoners to their homeland. The process of re-education, aimed at dismantling Nazi ideology, was implemented through structured programs, focusing on democratic principles and international cooperation. These efforts, documented in post-war repatriation directives, reflect the broader geopolitical shifts of the era as former adversaries were reintegrated into a rapidly changing world order. In this historical tableau, the shutdown of an Ohio factory for voting day stands as a testament to the enduring values of democracy, even amidst the trials of a world at war. The German POWs, observers to this exercise of civic duty, witnessed a system where participation was safeguarded and regulated, offering a glimpse into the ideological frameworks that would shape the post-war period. As the factory in Ohio stood silent, its machines dormant and its floors devoid of the usual clamor of wartime production, the German POWs assigned to maintenance tasks found themselves as passive spectators to an event that underscored a fundamental component of American democracy. The absence of noise, the stillness of the machinery, and the empty spaces where workers usually hustled to meet wartime demands created an atmosphere that was both eerie and enlightening for the German prisoners. The workers, whose absence was meticulously documented by the supervisors, had left to exercise their right to vote, a right that was legally protected even amidst the exigencies of war. This practice was not merely an administrative formality, but a demonstration of the nation's commitment to democratic principles, a commitment that was being scrutinized by those who had come from a nation where such freedoms were curtailed. The German prisoners, bound by the constraints of their roles and the regulations of the Geneva Convention, watched with a mixture of curiosity and detachment. Their experiences and observations at Camp Perry, where they were confined, painted a picture of an environment vastly different from the one they had left behind. The camp adhered strictly to the protocols outlined in the Geneva Convention, ensuring that the prisoners were treated humanely and with dignity. Educational programs were established, allowing prisoners to engage in academic pursuits and, in some cases, to question the ideologies that had led them to war. This newfound access to education was unprecedented for many of the POWs, who had been indoctrinated from a young age with the propaganda of the Nazi regime. The opportunity to learn about different political systems, philosophies, and cultures was both enlightening and, at times, disorienting. It challenged the very beliefs that had been ingrained in them, prompting a reevaluation of what they had once accepted as absolute truths. At Camp Perry, the daily routine was structured and predictable. Roll calls were conducted with military precision, meals were served at regular intervals, and the prisoners were assigned various labor tasks. These tasks were not only essential to the camp's operations, but also served as a means of instilling discipline and providing a semblance of normalcy. The camp's administration, comprised of American military personnel, was tasked with maintaining order and ensuring compliance with international standards. The guards, trained in accordance with War Department circulars, were well versed in the regulations governing the treatment of POWs, emphasizing respect and fairness. This approach was in stark contrast to the treatment that many of the prisoners had experienced or witnessed in German-run POW camps, where conditions were often harsh, and the Geneva Convention was not always observed. The occurrence at the factory, however, was an anomaly in the prisoners' routine. It presented a rare opportunity to observe the inner workings of a democratic society in action. The placard prominently displayed at the factory entrance, a testament to federal labor law, served as a silent educator, informing all who passed by of rights that were protected and cherished. For the POWs, this display of civic responsibility was both a spectacle and a lesson, offering insights into the cultural and legal frameworks that underpinned American life. The notion that workers could simply leave their posts to participate in the electoral process was astounding to many of the prisoners, who had been accustomed to a system where dissent was not tolerated and where the state's needs always took precedence over individual rights. In the days following the factory shutdown, discussions among the prisoners were inevitably influenced by what they had witnessed. Although overt displays of political opinion were discouraged within the confines of the camp, the event provided a catalyst for reflection and conversation. The prisoners, many of whom had been indoctrinated with Nazi ideology, found themselves grappling with contrasting perspectives. The educational programs at Camp Perry, designed to encourage critical thinking and expose prisoners to democratic ideals, played a crucial role in facilitating this intellectual exploration. These programs included lectures on the principles of democracy, the history of the United States, and the philosophical underpinnings of freedom and equality. For some prisoners, the exposure to these ideas was transformative, while for others it was a source of inner conflict. Meanwhile, the American supervisors at the factory diligently compiled attendance records, ensuring that each worker's participation in the electoral process was duly noted. This practice was not merely procedural, but served as a reinforcement of the accountability and transparency that characterized the electoral system. The temporary halt in production, while disruptive, was a calculated decision, one that underscored the importance placed on civic engagement and the belief that every vote contributed to the shaping of the nation's future. The American commitment to ensuring that all eligible citizens could exercise their right to vote, even during wartime, sent a powerful message about the values that the country held dear. As the war drew to a close, the focus at Camp Perry began to shift towards the repatriation and re-education of the POWs. The American authorities recognized the importance of addressing the ideological foundations that had fueled the conflict. Programs aimed at dismantling Nazi ideology were implemented, emphasizing democratic values and human rights. These efforts, while challenging, were considered vital to the broader goal of fostering a post-war world grounded in peace and cooperation. The process of re-education was met with varying degrees of resistance and acceptance among the prisoners. Some embraced the opportunity for change, eager to distance themselves from the past, while others remained steadfast in their beliefs, suspicious of the motives behind the American efforts. The factory's voting day event thus served as a microcosm of the larger democratic experiment taking place across the United States. It was a testament to the resilience of democratic institutions and the power of collective participation. For the German POWs, it offered a glimpse into a world where individual rights were protected and celebrated, a world that stood in stark contrast to the authoritarian regime they had served. This exposure to a functioning democracy was a revelation for many of the prisoners, who had been taught to view democracy as chaotic and weak. The orderly and principled manner in which the voting process was conducted challenged these preconceived notions and planted seeds of doubt about the superiority of authoritarian governance. In the months that followed, as the prisoners of war prepared for their eventual return to a changed Europe, the lessons learned in Ohio would linger. The exposure to American democratic practices, coupled with the structured educational programs at Camp Perry, contributed to a gradual shift in perspectives. While the transformation was neither immediate nor universal, the seeds of understanding had been planted, offering the possibility of a more informed and open-minded approach to the post-war challenges that lay ahead. The experience at Camp Perry and the factory served as a reminder of the possibilities inherent in a system that values individual rights and freedoms. Thus, the day the factory fell silent for voting became more than a historical footnote. It became a symbol of the enduring power of democracy and a reminder of the responsibilities inherent in its practice. It illustrated the potential for change and the capacity of individuals to learn and grow, even in the most constrained of circumstances. As the world moved towards peace, the events in that small Ohio town served as a beacon of hope and a testament to the ideals that would shape the future. The lessons learned by the German POWs about democracy, civic responsibility, and human rights would resonate as they returned to a Europe that was grappling with the aftermath of war and the challenge of rebuilding a more just and equitable society. The cessation of factory operations that day in Ohio was not merely a pause in the relentless churn of wartime industry, it was a moment that resonated deeply with both the local community and the German prisoners of war assigned to the facility. This factory, tucked away in the industrious heartland of America, had become an essential cog in the machinery of war, producing components crucial for military equipment that supported the Allied forces on distant battlefields. The decision to halt production, even for a brief period, was a deliberate choice, underscoring the profound value placed on civic duty and reinforcing the principle that democratic participation was a cornerstone of American society, one that transcended even the exigencies of war. For the German POWs, who were engaged in cleaning tasks under the watchful eyes of American guards, this day offered a window into a world governed by principles vastly different from those they had known. These prisoners, accustomed to the strict regimentation and authoritarian rule of the Nazi regime, observed with a mix of curiosity and incredulity the orderly exodus of workers from their posts. There was a complete absence of coercion or propaganda, hallmarks of governance in their home country. Instead, the emphasis was placed on the lawful facilitation and encouragement of voting, a concept altogether unfamiliar to many of the POWs, whose own political landscapes had often been marred by manipulation and suppression. Inside the factory, the shutdown was conducted with military precision, a testament to the culture of responsibility and foresight that pervaded every aspect of American life. Supervisors ensured that operations came to a halt in a manner that preserved the integrity of the production process. Machinery was safely powered down and materials were carefully stored to prevent spoilage or loss. These actions were not simply about maintaining productivity. They reflected a broader ethos of accountability and forward planning, extending beyond the immediate task of voting to encompass a holistic view of civic responsibility. For the American workers, this day was a reaffirmation of their rights and responsibilities as citizens of a democracy. Federal labor laws, prominently displayed on placards throughout the facility, guaranteed their right to participate in elections without fear of retribution or loss of wages. This legal framework acted as a protective barrier, ensuring that economic pressures did not impede democratic engagement. The workers, acutely aware of the significance of their participation, embraced the opportunity to influence local governance. They understood that their votes were not mere tokens, but held real power in shaping the community's future, a future in which they were active participants rather than passive observers. As the workers departed the factory, leaving behind the rhythmic hum of machines and the clatter of tools, the German POWs were left to ponder the stark contrast between their current environment and the regimes they had known. The POW camp at Camp Perry, meticulously organized in accordance with the Geneva Convention, provided an environment where discipline was maintained, yet rights and dignity were upheld. This adherence to international law was not merely for show, but demonstrated a commitment to principles that transcended the immediate context of war. It was a reflection of a belief in the rule of law and the inherent dignity of all individuals, regardless of their status as prisoners. Educational programs at Camp Perry aimed at re-education, introduced the POWs to democratic ideals and practices. These programs, designed by the War Department and conducted within the constraints of wartime resources, were carefully crafted to dismantle Nazi ideology through exposure to alternative worldviews. The prisoners participating in discussions and lectures were encouraged to reflect critically on their past beliefs and consider the merits of democratic governance. This was not a process of indoctrination, but rather an invitation to engage with ideas that promoted individual freedom and collective responsibility. The factory shutdown was more than a practical embodiment of these democratic ideals. It served as a catalyst for deeper intellectual exploration among the POWs. This exposure to American democracy in action offered a tangible example of the freedoms and responsibilities that came with such a system. It was a point of contrast not easily dismissed or forgotten, even as the war continued to unfold across continents. The POWs were confronted with the reality that there existed a form of governance where power was derived from the consent of the governed, where leaders were held accountable by those they served, and where individual voices mattered. In the days following the election, the factory resumed operations with renewed vigor. The workers, having exercised their right to vote, returned to their posts with a sense of accomplishment and participation. Production lines resumed their rhythmic cadence, and the German POWs continued their maintenance tasks, now with a heightened awareness of the societal structures surrounding them. The experience of witnessing democracy in action had left an indelible mark, prompting reflection on the values and principles that underpinned the society in which they found themselves. Reports from Camp Perry detailed the psychological and intellectual impact of these experiences on the POWs. While not all were immediately swayed, there was a discernible shift in attitudes among some prisoners. The exposure to democratic practices and the humane treatment received at the camp contributed to a gradual erosion of previously held ideologies. This process, while complex and multifaceted, underscored the potential for change through exposure and education, rather than coercion or force. It highlighted the power of ideas and the potential for transformation when individuals are invited to think critically and engage with alternative perspectives. The historical significance of this event extends beyond the confines of the Ohio factory and Camp Perry. It serves as a testament to the resilience and adaptability of democratic institutions, even in times of global conflict. The emphasis on civic engagement and lawful participation, as demonstrated by the factory shutdown, highlights the enduring power of democratic values to inspire hope and transformation. It is a reminder that even in the darkest times, the principles of freedom, equality, and participation can shine through, offering a beacon of hope and a path forward. As the war drew to a close, the experiences of the German POWs in Ohio became part of a broader narrative of reconciliation and rebuilding. The lessons learned from witnessing democratic processes firsthand provided a foundation upon which many would build their post-war lives. This exposure to American democracy, facilitated by the unique circumstances of war, contributed to a growing recognition of the values of freedom and participation, resonating long after the guns of war fell silent. It was a testament to the transformative power of democracy, not just as a system of government, but as a way of life that values the dignity and worth of every individual. In this historical tableau, the day the factory shut down for voting stands as a symbol of the enduring strength of democratic ideals. It reflects the ability of societies to prioritize fundamental rights even amidst the demands of wartime production. This event, meticulously documented and preserved, remains a poignant reminder of the power of democratic engagement to inspire change and foster understanding across cultural and ideological divides. It is a story of resilience, hope, and the enduring power of democratic ideals to shape a better future for all. The cessation of factory operations on that serene autumn day in Ohio, 1944, was an occurrence that stood distinctly apart from the routine disruptions typically associated with wartime production. As the shrill whistle echoed through the crisp air at precisely noon, signaling a temporary halt, the German POWs, strategically positioned throughout the factory for cleaning and maintenance duties, observed with a mixture of curiosity and bewilderment as American workers filed out in organized lines. The reason for their departure was not an emergency or a labor dispute, but rather an exercise of a fundamental democratic right: voting. The commitment to this civic duty was underpinned by federal labor laws thoughtfully crafted to ensure that every worker had the opportunity to participate in elections without fear of reprisal or economic penalty. These laws, a testament to the democratic ethos of the nation, mandated that workers were entitled to take time off to vote. This practice was documented meticulously by supervisors on the factory floor, who noted the names and departure times of each worker. A large, prominently displayed placard at the factory entrance served as a constant reminder of this legal obligation, citing the specific federal statutes that protected workers' rights to engage in the democratic process. The words on the placard, though simple, carried profound significance, embodying the rights and responsibilities of citizenship in a democratic society. For the POWs, this event was an educational moment, albeit one that was not part of their formal instruction at Camp Perry. The camp itself was a temporary home for these men who had been captured during various campaigns in Europe and transported across the vast Atlantic Ocean to the unfamiliar landscapes of America. The camp's environment was strictly regulated under the guidelines of the Geneva Convention, which meticulously dictated the treatment of prisoners of war. In addition to providing the basic necessities of food, shelter, and medical care, the American authorities had undertaken an ambitious program of re-education aimed at exposing the POWs to democratic ideals and countering the intense indoctrination they had experienced under the Nazi regime. The factory shutdown was one of several experiences that contributed to this broader educational effort. Within the confines of Camp Perry, the POWs participated in a series of lectures and discussions that highlighted the structure and function of democratic governance. These educational sessions were designed not only to inform, but also to foster critical thinking, encouraging the POWs to engage with the material on a personal level. The camp library, a modest yet invaluable resource, was stocked with books on history, politics, and philosophy, providing additional resources for those inclined to further exploration. Titles ranged from the Federalist Papers to works by Enlightenment thinkers, each selection carefully chosen to illuminate the principles of democracy and individual rights. The witnessing of the factory shutdown provided a practical illustration of the principles being taught at the camp. The act of voting facilitated by the shutdown was portrayed as a duty rather than merely a right, a cornerstone of the democratic process that underscored the power of individual participation in shaping governance. The efficiency and order with which the factory workers executed their civic responsibility were noted by the POWs, who saw in it a stark contrast to their experiences under a totalitarian regime where such liberties were either severely curtailed or manipulated for state purposes. This first-hand observation offered the POWs a glimpse into a society where the government was accountable to its citizens, a concept that challenged the authoritarian doctrines they had been taught. As the workers returned to their posts later in the day, the factory resumed its operations with a renewed sense of purpose. The production lines roared back to life, and the rhythmic clatter of machinery filled the vast halls once more. The POWs, having completed their tasks for the day, were escorted back to Camp Perry, where the significance of what they had witnessed was likely a topic of lively discussion among them. The juxtaposition of their daily labor and the democratic exercise they had observed provided fertile ground for reflection and debate. The impact of this event on the POWs extended beyond the immediate experience. It served as a catalyst for reflection on the values and systems that defined their captors' society. The exposure to such democratic practices, coupled with the educational efforts at the camp, was intended to sow seeds of doubt about the ideology they had once embraced. By providing an alternative framework of governance based on participation and rights, the American authorities hoped to influence the POWs' perspectives, fostering an appreciation for democratic principles that could potentially aid in the reconstruction efforts in post-war Germany. The historical context of this period cannot be overlooked. As World War II reached its zenith, the Allies were deeply invested not only in achieving military victory, but also in shaping the post-war world. Initiatives like those at Camp Perry were part of a broader strategy to promote democratic ideals and stability in a future Europe, a continent ravaged by years of conflict and ideological extremism. The experiences of the German POWs, therefore, were seen as opportunities to influence individual attitudes and, by extension, contribute to larger geopolitical goals. In examining the records from this period, one finds detailed accounts of the various programs implemented at Camp Perry and similar facilities. War Department circulars and inspection reports meticulously highlight the emphasis placed on humane treatment and ideological rehabilitation, aligning with the broader objectives of the Allied powers. These documents provide a window into the operational aspects of the camp, revealing the structured nature of the re-education initiatives and their intended impact. The reports often contain testimonies from both American officers and POWs, offering insights into the successes and challenges of this ambitious endeavor. The factory shutdown remains a significant anecdote within this larger narrative, encapsulating the democratic spirit that the United States sought to project during the war. It is a testament to the resilience of democratic institutions and their capacity to inspire change, even in the most challenging of times. The POWs, as passive observers of this process, were afforded a unique perspective that challenged their preconceptions and offered new avenues for intellectual exploration. As the war drew to a close and repatriation efforts commenced, the experiences of the POWs at Camp Perry, including the factory shutdown, likely lingered in their minds. These moments of exposure to democratic values and practices were intended to serve as foundational elements in the reconstruction of their homeland, where the lessons learned could contribute to building a more democratic and peaceful society. The historical record thus reflects not only the events themselves, but also their lasting impact on those who witnessed them, marking a chapter in the broader story of World War II and its aftermath. The legacy of Camp Perry and its innovative approach to POW management underscores the transformative power of education and exposure to new ideas. As these men returned to a devastated Germany, they carried with them not only memories of their captivity, but also seeds of democratic thought sown during their time in the Ohio heartland. These seeds, nurtured by the experiences and reflections prompted by events like the factory shutdown, held the potential to grow into a more equitable and just society in the post-war years. In the aftermath of the war, as German POWs were repatriated, the experiences they had in the United States, particularly at places like Camp Perry, began to bear fruit in subtle yet significant ways. Many returned to a homeland in ruins, both physically and ideologically, faced with the daunting task of rebuilding not only infrastructure, but also a societal framework that had been deeply compromised by years of authoritarian rule. The exposure to democratic principles and practices, such as the factory shutdown for voting, had left an indelible mark on some of the former prisoners. These experiences provided a contrasting narrative to the ideologies they had been taught, offering an alternative perspective on governance and individual rights. While not all embraced these ideas immediately, the seeds of democracy had been sown, contributing to a broader shift in mindset during the post-war Reconstruction period. In the years that followed, Germany underwent a significant transformation, with democratic institutions slowly taking root and gaining strength. The Marshall Plan and other international efforts supported the nation's economic recovery, while internal initiatives focused on re-establishing a democratic government. The influence of former POWs who had witnessed democratic processes firsthand played a role, however small, in this societal evolution. As historians reflect on this period, the story of the Ohio factory shutdown emerges as a microcosm of the broader ideological battle that was fought alongside the physical conflict of World War II. It exemplifies the power of democratic ideals to inspire change and foster understanding, even in the most constrained of circumstances. The event stands as a testament to the resilience and adaptability of democratic institutions, highlighting their capacity to endure and influence across cultural and ideological divides. The legacy of Camp Perry and similar initiatives underscores the potential for transformation through education and exposure to new ideas. As these former POWs integrated back into society, the lessons learned during their captivity contributed, in varying degrees, to the rebuilding of a more democratic and peaceful Europe. This chapter in history thus serves as a reminder of the enduring strength of democratic values and the profound impact of viewing governance through a lens of participation and rights. The cessation of factory operations in Ohio for the purpose of voting remains a poignant symbol of the power of civic engagement, illustrating the capacity for democratic principles to transcend immediate conflict and inspire future generations. As the world moved forward from the devastation of war, the experiences of those who witnessed such practices played a part in shaping a more equitable and just global society.